The Fell God is one of the most destructive forces in the lands between. It alone holds the power to burn the Erdtree, and, as we will discuss later, the Shadow Tree as well. It strikes fear into the hearts of the Hornsent and their mortal enemy Queen Marika alike, smoldering ever so deadly until the day our Tarnished sacrifices Melina to wield it against the Erdtree. Yet we know very little about it. Join me as we explore the Fell God's ancient, possibly cosmic origins, its original form, and how it became the misshapen, giant-dwelling form we encounter for ourselves on the mountaintops of the Giants. Let's get into it. The Fell God is a unique mystery in the lands between. Unlike many other gods, it is depicted in detail on multiple items and in a boss fight. There are so many depictions that some even contradict each other. The one-eyed shield portrays the Fell God as a malformed, one-eyed god, once worshipped by the Giants. And the Fire Monk armor, which features a grotesque face sculpted on the chest, is said to depict the corrupt ancient god of the flame. We even face this one-eyed monstrosity for ourselves when it awakens from within the torso of the fire giant, and yet, these items and our own experiences clash with other testimonies of the Fell God's appearance. The Furnace Visage, a smaller imitation of a furnace golem's face, is a stone mask surrounded by curled horns, depicting the Fell God of Fire that haunts the sagas of the Hornsent. At a glance, we can note some obvious visual distinctions between the former items, which present the Fell God as a one-eyed being with strong, troll-like features, and the latter visage, which portrays it with two eyes, a standard humanoid face, and protruding, curled horns. So what are the reasons for this difference, and what are the implications? To start, it is worth noting that the one-eyed shield and Fire Monk armor describe the Fell God as being malformed and grotesque, implying that someone, or something, altered its appearance. The force responsible for its alteration is likely Queen Marika, since the one-eyed shield also tells us that the Fell God is believed to have been slain by her. Though it was undoubtedly defeated, the Fell God's presence persists within the lands between. It is said to inhabit the fireball cast by the flame of the Fell God incantation, and the smoldering fire contained by the Forge of the Giants is likely its divine essence. The remembrance of the fire giant tells us that the flames of the Giant's forge will never die, and the Surge O' Flame incantation describes the Fell God's ruinous blaze as being sealed away. The term sealed draws parallels to the outer god of Rot, who once possessed a physical form with scorpion-like features, if the scorpion stinger is anything to go off of, but now lives on as a divine essence sealed away in the lake of Rot. With a precedent established that gods can change form and continue to exert their influence when sealed away, we can confidently claim that the one-eyed depiction of the Fell God is not its original form, as it was left misshapen by its defeat at the hands of Queen Marika. If this is the case, what did the Fell God look like, and how did it behave before its demise? The Fell God is quite possibly one of the oldest divine entities in Elden Ring. After all, it haunts the sagas of the Hornsent, a culture that likely spawned during or just after the Crucible era. The Roar Medallion tells us that, in ancient times, the Giants were mortal enemies of the Erdtree. Their bellowing roars desolated nature, triggered avalanches, and whipped up storms of flame. It is reasonable to assume that the Hornsent feared the Giants and their Fell God for these same destructive actions, because of their affiliation with nature. After all, the divine beast Dancing Lion and horned warriors regularly summon lightning, wind, frost, and even deathblight, but never, not once, do they summon fire. So what exactly is the origins of the Fell God, which strikes fear into the hearts of the Hornsent and the Golden Order alike? There is a strong possibility that the Fell God, like many of the gods in Elden Ring's pantheon, originates from within the cosmos. Calling back to the furnace visage, I can't help but notice an odd resemblance to the Dung Eater's sun medallion, as well as the depiction of the sun found on the sundial when we choose to pass time. But how could a face with protruding horns possibly relate to the sun? The Hornsent are a culture that idolizes aspects of the Crucible, especially horns, so everything in their culture likely becomes translated through that lens. I argue that in ancient times, they looked to the sky, saw the sun's beaming rays, and interpreted them as horns in their sagas. Then, when Messmer undertook his crusade, he modeled the furnace golems after Hornsent depictions of the fell god in their folklore to ensure they were as intimidating as possible. It wouldn't be the first time the Hornsent feared a horned object either, as we know they denied and hid the Lamenter's mask because of the terror it instilled within them. To state it clearly, the Furnace Visage's similarities to depictions of the sun in Elden Ring suggest that the fell god may have once dwelled within the sun. However, we know it was not entirely the sun, because the sun is still visible in Elden Ring, though often obscured by the Erdtree. The fell god's awakened eye also hints at solar connections, resembling a swirling ball of fire sprinkled with dark areas that remind one of sunspots. The flame of the fell god incantation also supports this visual, resembling the sun with a solar flare arcing from its surface. Could it be that the giants inhabit the mountaintops to be closer to the fell god in its solar form, to better channel its destructive power? After all, the astrologers established themselves high in the mountaintops for a similar reason, to study the stars and channel their power through glintstone sorceries. But if the fell god once dwelled within the sun, why is this no longer the case? We know that the sun of the lands between has undergone at least one transformation. According to the Sun Realm Shield, there was once a city crowned by the sun that is now long faded away. A spirit NPC at Castle Sol even refers to the sun as being frigid, suggesting it can no longer generate heat. With this knowledge, we can theorize that the sun faded and became frigid when the fell god descended and became terrestrial bound. As to how and why this happened, we can only speculate. My theory is that the Hornsent trapped the fell god and dragged it from the cosmos out of fear of its destructive power. Examining Enir Ilim, the spiral staircase extends far above the Gate of Divinity, implying it had more than one purpose. Perhaps the Hornsent used the tower to reach the fell god, wage war on it, and dethrone it. While this theory relies heavily on speculation, there is one piece of contextual evidence to support this claim. We know that Elden Ring's world is inspired by alchemy, thanks to Smotown's excellent analysis in his Queen Marika and the Erdtree video, and an aspect of alchemical symbolism includes a depiction of a lion devouring the sun. While this is merely a surface-level connection, the horned warriors of Enir Ilim and the divine beast guarding its entrance dress to mimic lions, so it is possible that Fromsoftware considered this symbolism when designing the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. But again, this explanation is highly speculative and intended to provide a fun explanation rather than a concrete answer. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Regardless of how the fell god wound up terrestrial bound, sealed, and malformed, it continues its legacy of destruction through an affliction on Marika's children. A vision, no, two visions of fire that would become the scourge of the Hornsent and the Golden Order alike. Two siblings, one to kindle, and another to burn. That is the fate bestowed upon Melina and Messmer. But is their flame the ruinous flame of the fell god? Let's uncover the truth. Messmer's kindling tells us that he and his sister, which we can assume to be Melina, both bore a vision of fire. and both serve as kindling to burn the thorns of their respective trees. While Melina burns the impenetrable thorns of the Erdtree voluntarily, Messmer's kindling is taken by force following his defeat at the Shadowkeep, and used by our Tarnished to burn the Sealing Tree. According to the Surge o' Flame incantation, the Fell God's Flame of Ruin is the only force capable of burning the impenetrable thorns of the Erdtree. We know that Melina serves as kindling for this flame, according to her Blade of Calling, which refers to her as the Kindling Maiden, and our first-hand experience watching her channel the Flame of Ruin to set fire to the Erdtree, all but confirming her affliction. If the Fell God dwells within Melina, it likely dwells within her flame-wielding brother as well. But before we move on to discussing Messmer, we need to cover something important about Melina. She may have burned the Erdtree not once, but twice. The Tarnished archaeologist convincingly argues that the prevalence of ash and wax-sealed doors in Leyndell evidences that the Erdtree was burned long before our Tarnished arrived in the Lands Between. Given Melina's role as the Kindling Maiden, and the fact she tells us that she is burned and bodiless, it is entirely possible that she served as the Kindling Maiden once before. If so, could it be that Melina's remains are the pile of ash sitting in the center of the Forge of the Giants? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, let us examine Messmer to see if he, too, is afflicted with the flame of the Fell God. We know that fire persists within Messmer, just as the Flame of Ruin eternally smolders within the Forge of the Giants. The Messmer's Orb incantation reads, Messmer despised his own fire. Time and time again, he hoped to rid himself of it, but ever did it burn. Messmer may have despised his fire because of his fierce loyalty to the Golden Order, knowing that the primal force within him is an existential threat to the Erdtree. Another connection between Messmer and the Fell God is the opening attack from both phases of his boss fight, a fireball with a delayed explosion that strongly resembles the Flame of the Fell God incantation. More telling is that Messmer's kindling can burn the impenetrable thorns of the Shadow Tree via the Sealing Tree, just as Melina's kindling does for the Erdtree. If both siblings' kindling can burn the trees of their respective lands, it is only sensible to conclude that their flames are of the same divine essence, that of the Fell God. After thoroughly exploring the Fell God's origins and impact on the world of Elden Ring, I hope you learned something new, or at the very least, found these ideas entertaining. At the end of the day, I am presenting theory and speculation, not hard fact, so please keep this in mind when commenting. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel grow and every click counts. Thank you, and see you next time.